Hey everybody, this is just to catch you up on everything that we needed to talk about for the remainder of the Achievement, Motivation, and Stress unit. Now, some of this we did cover in class. The entire idea that changes in life can lead to stress, and as stability kind of becomes more a part of your life, stress often decreases. So any kind of alterations in your life circumstances can result in stress. So this is something called the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, and as you look at it, many of the things on here appear very negative, but there are still positive things that can still result in high levels of stress. Becoming a parent, getting married, going on vacation, beginning or ending school, all of those things usually tend to be good events in our life, but come with a high level of stress. Things where you expect stability to be, like in your marriage or your spouse, those things when something traumatic or unexpected happens, say divorce or even the death, those tend to have some of the greatest kind of impacts on stress. We need to talk about something called your stress response system. So when we're looking at it, stress is part of fight or flight. And so when we go into this fight or flight state, you are going to activate your sympathetic nervous system. That autonomic nervous system divides into two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And again, once the sympathetic starts kicking in, you're going to have an outpouring of epinephrine and norepinephrine, adrenal glands, increase in heart rate, increase in respiration, mobilization of sugar and fat. All of these things are kicking on. And if you stay at this rate too long, it can make you sick. In other words, this is meant to be a temporary state to help you deal with things that should be life-threatening. But again, our brain doesn't differentiate between a perceived stressor and an actual life-threatening stressor. When looking at the stress response system, you also need to remember the parts of the brain that are going to be active. So we're looking at things like the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Now, the pituitary gland is the master gland of the endocrine system. Hopefully you guys remember that. And it gets its orders from the hypothalamus. So again, this makes sense in the unit that we're talking about. They're going to respond to stress. They're going to trigger things like your adrenal glands that will pump out adrenaline, but also glucocorticoids, which are what we call cortisol. Now, the reading I gave you in class gives you all the information about how glucocorticoids can impact not only your heart health, but your immune system as well. Just another look. Please read through this, pause the video, take a chance to look at what the pituitary gland is doing to the bloodstream, how your sympathetic division of your autonomic nervous system is causing changes also throughout the body. You need to know something called the GAS, or the General Adaptation Syndrome. Now, as we were talking in the reading, these things can happen like within an hour. So we're not talking like prolonged stress for years. This can be just a major stressor that doesn't seem to go away. So this is going to come from Martin Seeley. A stress response to any kind of stimulation is similar. So the first thing you have is, if you look at this, stress resistance. You want to have high resistance to stress. When there's low resistance to it, it means stress is going to kind of take over. So the first thing you see in the alarm phase is that you have a dip in your resistance. This is why when a stressor kind of comes up, we may feel attacked, we might feel freaked out, we might have a panic. Then we'll do those assessments. We'll look at what is available. So we have that primary, now we get into our secondary assessment, we see what our coping mechanisms are, and we get into that second phase of resistance. We cope with the stressor, see what our opportunities or our options are. But we can only stay at this kind of state for so long. If the stress doesn't resolve itself, the body goes into exhaustion. Our reserves get depleted. We are stuck getting sick, getting tired, getting irritable. The ravages of stress start to take their toll. Be sure that you have memorized this entire chart. It is important that you know the three phases, that you understand what's going on during the three phases. Again, we're going to talk about these really quick. So, psychological reactions, you can change your emotions. It can impact the way that you think, so cognitions are going to get involved. It can change how motivated you are. You may feel less motivated to get up and do things. It can cause anxiety, depression, anger, irritability. It can make you more or less interested in things like food or sex. The GAS syndrome, alarm, resistance, exhaustion. There are healthy and unhealthy aspects of this system. You need to know the GAS, so these physical responses that happen to stressors. The alarm reaction. This is a mobilization of resources to cope with the stressor. So adrenaline hormones will be released. Your sympathetic nervous system, you're going to go into fight or flight. Resistance, your body starts to adapt. You're at that kind of plateau stage. Your adrenaline input or output should start to decrease, and your parasympathetic should be trying to calm you down. This is where you get a little more clear-headed in a stressed situation, and you start to assess. Exhaustion, you've been there for so long that your body just has no more energy to give. The stressor is not removed. Over time, and this is not a joke, death could occur because of stress. Some of the unhealthy things that this can lead to: heart disease, asthma, ulcers, arthritis, other disorders, because again, if it has such a huge impact on your immune system, that is going to dictate how your body reacts to a whole lot of other stuff. It's going to impact your health. Our immune system is vitally important to our health, but it's also going to impact cardiac health. It's going to impact, reproduction. It impacts a huge number of things that often we just want to ignore. Personality type also has an impact when it comes to stress. So if you have ever been told you're a type A personality, it means that you are very competitive, very driven. You can be very aggressive and anger prone. These type of people are more likely to develop coronary heart disease and be more susceptible to stress. If you're type B, it means you're more easygoing and relaxed. Now, I always talk about my temperament being short-tempered, but I'm more of a type B person. I try, and it's been something I've worked at, I try to not let the little stuff bother me. The big stuff, yes, the big stuff has to bother you. You have to address the big stuff. But there's so many little daily things that if you're a type A, those things build. If you're a type B, you might be more likely to just kind of bypass them a bit easier. Here's what your heart looks like. So remember, we had that reading and I told you guys plaque will start to build up. Well, this is coronary artery plaque. Your blood can become viscous like honey. So imagine trying to kind of get honey to leak through a clogged artery. We don't want that. We want a healthy cardiac profile. Open arteries, blood flowing with ease, giving nutrients and oxygen to our body. So stress that leads to elevated blood pressure can result in coronary heart disease, clogging of the vessels that nourish the heart, and the heart tissue can die. Here again, type A personality, and please understand type A versus type B, this is kind of a sliding scale. You're not exclusively one or the other. You might be, but you could also be kind of elements of both. If you have a lot of type A, like highly competitive, hard driving, ambitious, that's actually good. And in sports and stuff like that, I like to win. But you don't want to be a workaholic. Being a perfectionist is never a good idea. Perfectionists never reach perfection. So you want to do a good job. You want to do your best job. But you also want to understand that perfection, that's a concept that really is very unattainable by normal people. They can speak loud or explosively, often being hostile or aggressive or angry with others. Those are all things that just ramp up more stress. Pessimism. This is a strange one that people don't think about. But if you are constantly negative about the world, or another form of pessimism, you never see an option. So optimists, they're not necessarily people who are just happy-go-lucky and think the world's the greatest place. Optimists actually are plan B or second plan type people. So plan A doesn't work out, plan number 1 doesn't work out for me. I go, all right, what is my plan B? There always has to be something. And so it changes the outlook on the world. If you're pessimistic, if it's all doom and gloom, if the first shot doesn't work and that means everything is dead after that point and nothing will ever work out, you've basically given yourselves so many additional stressors. So pessimistic adult men, and men are more likely to be type A personalities, are twice as likely to develop heart disease over a 10-year period. And again, optimists don't, because optimists are going to see a second option. They're going to have a plan B or a number 2 option or a number 3 or a number 4. There's no door closing, or it's that a door closes, a window opens type mentality. That's a much healthier way of looking at the world. Coping with stress, literally coping, reducing stress by effective efforts to master, reduce, or tolerate the demands created by the stress. Literally looking at what is available to you and how you can deal with it. So you fail a test, you might cope by increasing your studying, seek out a tutor, or blame your teacher. Well, the first two are effective. They can change the outcome. The second one, well, it might make you feel better and it might assuage any feelings of guilt that you have, but it doesn't change the outcome the next time you test. So how you cope can often increase or decrease later stress. So we have defensive coping, constructive coping. Defensive. A lot of these come from Freud, and he would call them defense mechanisms. Denial of reality, making it a fantasy. Oh, in a perfect world, I would be doing this. Over intellectualizing. Well, they were just stupid because of. Trying to undo it or trying to overcompensate. Any of these things are meant to defend you, but they don't really help you with the problem. Constructive coping, you confront the problem, you appraise the situation, you look at your emotional response, and you try to find a plan B. Gender differences, women are more likely to have lasting reactions to traumatic events, and a lot of that has to do with our emotional regulation, but they're also at more risk for exposure. When we look at things like committed relationships or marriage, they tend to be really good buffers, mostly because you have someone to rely on. They buffer against stress. People who are married often live healthier or longer lives on average. However, the loss of a spouse often affects men more often than does women. Women are more likely to make social connections. The best way to have kind of resiliency against stress is to have people you can rely on, not internet friends, not social media friends, not people you can only text, but people that you can actually connect with in a true person-to-person, face-to-face way. And there's always this after effect. Because we can't turn this into an experiment, it might simply be that people who are married are just healthier people and therefore they choose marriage. Men and women don't always respond the same way to stress. Now they can, because we both use fight or flight, but men are more likely to resort to fight or flight to deal with the situation, become aggressive, or to retreat from it. Women, on the other hand, are more likely to do something called tend and befriend, create alliances, try to work with the person, try to understand them. The average response to the workplace stress, mothers can tend to be a bit more nurturing, fathers tend to be grouchy or withdrawn. These are tendencies, so please don't assume that just because you're a woman, you're going to immediately be nurturing. But you may look to check out the social relationships and the functioning between people instead of just getting confrontational. If you're a guy, it doesn't mean that you're just going to be confrontational. You might do some of that tend and befriend, but these are also things that you can think through. And if you see yourself having a tendency towards fight or flight, think about maybe other aspects or other ways to address stressors. Last thing that we'll talk about when we talk about stress and disease. When we talk about psychophysical illness, it's related to a physical illness like hypertension and headaches, but we also see hypochondriasis. And so when we have talked about hypochondriasis, I think everyone's heard the term before. We're talking about hypochondriacs. In other words, they start to see every physical symptom as the possibility of being a much larger disease. And again, when we look at things that are psychosomatic, their physical ailments were thought to be caused by stress and other psychological factors. People can get themselves ill or think themselves ill. So it's important to tackle stress and try to address it as head-on and as kind of calm and rationally and positively as possible. People who get stressed get sick more often. We've covered that one pretty well in class. That has to do with the fact that it starts to exhaust your immune system. Last thing, stress has health-related consequences. So if we're looking at persistent stressors and negative emotions, you might have unhealthy behavior. You have the release of stress hormones. Those stress hormones can result in heart disease, immune suppression, autonomic nervous system effects like headaches and hypertension. Stress is bad unless you learn how to healthfully deal with stress. See stressors as challenges instead of doom and gloom. Look for a plan B. Understand what your coping mechanisms are. Be in control of your life and your choices. And when something goes wrong, know that it's not the end of everything, that it might just have to be a readjustment in the way that you think. All right, so I got this covered for you guys. We will still have another one that has to do with emotions. I will try to get that posted today or at least by the weekend. Please watch through this. You will test on Monday or Tuesday, whichever day I see you guys next.